procrastinating when it comes to doing these book reviews. Although I don't really feel like it was procrastinating. Some of them are, some of them aren't. This one that I'm doing right now is The House We Grew Up In by Lisa Jewell, and I tend to love Lisa Jewell. But the deal with this book was, not only did I not like it, if I don't like a book, sometimes it's great to do a review because I have so much to say and I get so passionate. This one I'm so ambivalent about that I don't really want to rehash it. This was one of those books where if I am already not in a good mood, this is not going to help. And it's unfortunate because I really like Lisa Jewell. I do have some books over here, one in particular that I have been meaning to finish for years, and I've actually been reading it, so I can't even blame my lack of interest on a bad narrator. It's just a book that I thought I would like and I don't. And so The House We Grew Up In falls in line with that. It falls in line with the handful of her books that I cannot get behind. A lot of reviewers on Goodreads thought it was fantastic. Good for you. I would love to find someone who agrees with me in that it was so boring. It was really slow. I kept waiting. Oh, it's raining. It's not raining. It's pouring. It's raining. It's pouring. Old man is snoring. But The House We Grew Up In. I just kept waiting for something to happen, and I felt like nothing ever did. There was a moment that kept being referred to, yet when we finally got to that moment and I got really excited, it was so anticlimactic. But in order to tell you what that moment is, I should probably tell you what the book is about. The book focuses on the Bird family. There's the dad Colin, the mom Lorelai, the oldest sister Meg, and then there's Beth, and then the twins Reese. It's spelled R-H-Y-S, and so my brain automatically goes to Reese. But it's Reese and then Rory. It flips between a bunch of narrators, largely Meg and then Lorelai. Although Lorelai is not so much of a narration as she is emailing this guy named Jim. So we get her emails. We do get a little bit of Rory, and I think we get some Beth as well. So we have a number of narrators, and it kind of tells us about this family. We learn that big incident, something happened. It tore the family apart, which, as I said, when we got to that incident, I didn't feel like that necessarily did anything to the family that wasn't already there. And then we learn that Lorelai is a hoarder, and then this causes strife, particularly with Meg, who, having grown up in that kind of household, almost overcompensates to the other side of things and is incredibly type A. And because of her type A tendencies, she cannot understand why her mother does what she does. And that kind of does cause strife because the rest of her family is like, what is the problem? Why do you even care? You're not even living here anymore. Let her be happy. Let her do what she does. The story also revolves around Lorelai's death, or not even her death, but the aftermath of her death, because that is how it opens, with Meg and her oldest daughter going to Lorelai's house. And the daughter is like, what in the world is going on here? And then that is how the family story starts unraveling. I know that's really vague, a very generic, general overview, but I can't do any better than that because this book, in my opinion, had no point. When I was writing out my list of talking points, I just kept saying, what's the point? What's the purpose? Where are we going? And I think that might be why I didn't like this book. I can recognize that what Lisa Jewell did so well here, which is something she continually does well, in my opinion, it is her strong suit, is characterization. She knows how to create layered, dimensional characters that have flaws, that you like, that you dislike, that you can't figure out where you really stand on them. I realized in the end, this book was more about character than plot, and I prefer plot over character. So we're just gonna go with that. And if you like a character-driven novel, if you like literary fiction, I think you will like The House We Grew Up In. Can I tell you why it's called the house we grew up in? Not really, because I don't feel like the house was a character in and of itself. Yes, this is where the story kind of starts, in which we are approaching it when Meg and her daughter are gonna look it over to see what can be done in the aftermath of Lorelai's death. And then when we start at the very beginning, I say start at the very beginning. So the beginning is, yes, Meg is approaching this house. But then when we flash back to Meg's childhood, we are at this house. And so we do come back to it every now and again. Even after Lorelai and Colin divorce, they both live in the same house, which I am actually having a hard time picturing. I think the house was something of a duplex. Then they turned it into a single family home. But then after the divorce, they reverted it back. So he lived on one side, she lived on one side. But the house is located, Lisa Jewell is English. All of her stories take place largely in England, London, the surrounding areas. So this is in the Cotswolds. And if you know anything about the Cotswolds, it's that picture perfect, not gingerbread, but that picture perfect setting with all those really pretty houses. Hopefully I can insert picture here. And so what I'm seeing from those houses doesn't look like they're duplexes of any form. So this was one moment in the novel was like, I really cannot picture what she's trying to draw for me. We do end up coming back to this house, but why it's called the house we grew up in, I don't know, because it's not like all the major moments in their lives happened at this house. Some spoilers. The two biggest incidences, in my opinion, are Reese kills himself. Why does he kill himself? I don't quite know. We are given very little about him. He's apparently an odd duck. How that contributes to his suicide, I'm not sure. There is this instance in which he came on to his mother, and when she rejected him, the next day is when he killed himself. We're led to believe that not only does she blame herself for his death, but that his death may also have been the catalyst for her hoarding, which I don't quite believe, because I don't think you can just all of a sudden have hoarding tendencies, which is evidenced by the earliest flashback in which she's already saving things. At that point, it's cute, it's fun, it's whatever. The first big incident is Reese's death and how that does affect all of the family members. I won't say it has a huge effect on the family members, but it does linger. It sticks with them throughout the novel, and it is something that they eventually need to have resolution for at the end. The second big event, which is what is continually hinted at, is, oh my gosh, this book, like, it's overwhelming. So there's a ton of characters, and even though they're done well, I feel like there's so many of them that not all of them can be fully completed. But then there's so much that happens that I feel like on top of all the characters, all of these events just are discombobulating. But as I've mentioned, Lorelai and Colin have divorced. They divorce because I don't know if it's necessarily because of this. It seems that he's really already lost interest in her by this point, but she ends up falling in love with their next door neighbor, who happens to be a woman. This woman, I cannot remember her name for the life of me, and it's been at least 3 months since I've read this book. I can't find anything online that gives me a good character list, which, can I just say, I think that's what I love about this channel so much. Like, that is what I wanted with this channel, is when you go online and all you want is a summary of the book, you don't want the same summary over and over, which is what you find on the dust flap. Like, I want to give people something they can't get anywhere else. I want to give them the information that nobody else will give them. Why nobody else will give it? I don't know. In any case, let's go back to where I was trying to start. The lover, who we do actually get some of her narration too. So there's like 5 or 6 narrators in this book, which she can pull it off, or she's allowed to do it because Lisa Jewell is such a great writer and she is so successful and blah, blah, blah. But the lover has died and Lorelai wants her family to come to the funeral. Not that they necessarily, except for maybe Colin, not that they necessarily have a problem with the lover, but it's not like they really view her as being part of their family. In any case, let me finally get to my point. I'm just gonna spit it out because I know that's what you're all saying. What was hinted at was that at this funeral, there's a huge blow up which sends the family in all directions. In actuality, what happens? And you're gonna need a little bit more background. I'm really sorry that that you feel like I'm just doing minutia without just spitting it out. Rory, when he, I don't know, 18 or something, meets this girl named Kaylee, and he's in love with her. The family doesn't particularly like her, but Rory is like, this is the girl of my dreams. They end up moving to this almost cultish compound in Spain, because what happens is they're just supposed to go on a vacation. They end up living at this compound for years. She gets pregnant, he bolts. She is in contact with his family because he will have nothing to do with her. She forms a relationship with his dad, and of course the family really hates that. Oh, did you hear that? At the funeral, Kaylee shows up with Colin and her daughter with Rory. Meg shows up with her family. Beth is also there, who, spoiler alert, Meg was unaware that Beth had been sleeping with her husband. All of these people are here, and it sounds like a fantastic setup, and it should have been a fantastic setup. Kaylee, who is probably my favorite character, because even though we're not supposed to like her, I like that, unlike me, who's apparently unable to get to my point right now, she always is matter of fact. And so she, years earlier, had cottoned on to the fact that Beth was sleeping with Bill. And she also cottoned on to the fact that the kids, the family, didn't necessarily respect the lover. And so she comes to this funeral not necessarily sure why. I don't think it was necessarily to pay respects to this dead lover, or maybe it was more like, I want my daughter's family to get to meet her and see her and, you know, look at my relationship with Colin and accept the fact that we're together. Myriad of reasons, nothing that I could really pinpoint. But she essentially opens her big mouth and says, look, here are all the truths that nobody wants to acknowledge. That is when everything should go to pot. But Meg, upon learning of her husband and sister's affair, it's like, oh. And so I wanted her on one hand to be like, are you kidding? Because we've known about this affair for some time. And I, specifically, am like, holy cow, Meg, like, I just want you to know it already. And so now that you do know it, I want you to be as incensed as I am. And she's not. But then on the other hand, I'm kind of glad that she's not, because that isn't the reaction that you're expecting. So I liked that Jewel threw me for a loop in that. But overall, that was it. Like, that was the big moment in which I was expecting big things to happen, and nothing did. Now we're gonna keep moving. Like, I don't see how it tore the family apart, because Meg never divorced her husband. She eventually forgave Beth, I guess. And here's something else I don't understand. There's so much I do not understand about the characters, about their motivations, about why anything is happening. Beth is not a particularly sexual being, yet she's having an affair with Bill, even though she doesn't necessarily enjoy the sex. So I don't understand why she's with him. I don't understand actually why he's with her. It seems that she is supposed to be filling a role that Meg is not, but I don't know what role that is. They've mentioned that Beth is a bit more feminine than Meg, because Meg, in her type A-ness, is very regimented with her clothing and her lifestyle, and so she just wears very polished, straightforward clothing, nothing that necessarily hints at femininity. And so maybe that's what he's seen in Beth, or maybe he likes the fact that Beth is not so rigid. Yeah, I don't understand why they're together. But then Beth, without ever letting Meg talk to her, runs off to Australia. She'd had a co-worker who was Australian, and they'd started something, but then he went back to Australia, and then she was like, oh, I'm gonna go with him. So she does run off. She didn't run off to Australia, but she does run off. She won't let Meg talk to her, but then she does go to Australia at some point. And even though that relationship doesn't work out, she stays there, even though she doesn't really want to be there. She does get in a relationship, a semi-serious relationship with someone. Apparently that doesn't work out, and then here's a spoiler. She shows up for Lorelai's funeral, like 9 months pregnant. Who lets her fly at 9 months pregnant? I do not understand at all. And of course, she shows up at Meg's house. Not that anything big happened, but I'm pausing because nothing really happened at all. Meg was essentially, they may have had a come to Jesus moment via email. I don't remember. It's been too long and I don't really care. But yeah, Meg is like, oh, it's so great to see you. Who's the dad? And Beth's like, I don't really know. And Meg is asking, hey, what are you going to do? And Beth's like, I don't really know. Are you going to stay in London? Are you going to go to Australia? I don't really know. Yeah, that's the excitement level that we get from this book. And then we have Rory, who, after abandoning Kaylee, ran off to Thailand with another guy from the compound. He thought that he and this dude were besties. The other dude was not a good dude. He owns, I think it's like a strip joint, and he runs drugs, and he has Rory act as his bouncer, yet he also has him run drugs for him. And then when the police come calling, he blames it all on Rory. So then Rory goes to jail rather than roll over on his friend. There was an opportunity in which Rory could get out of it all, and he chooses to stay in jail as penance for leaving Kaylee and his daughter. And this is when I say that while Jewell is exceptional at her characterization, she had too many characters. She had too many plot lines running, and she could not fully realize all of them. And Rory, aside from Reese, who, yes, I never understood why he did what he did, Rory is probably my next biggest issue, although Beth was a pretty big issue too, because I do not know why he chose to behave the way he did. Of the two twins, he was the normal one. He was the popular one. He was the one that you'd think would have it all together. And while I know the key word there is think, I don't know why he went from somebody who seemed to have a pretty great life, who seemed to be on a great path, to somebody who lives at a cultish compound, runs off with a drug dealer, ends up in a Thai prison, and then comes home. He continually recognizes his inability to connect with others, to emotionally attach himself, and to care. And so that's when I'm like, well, why did you fall in love with Kaylee? I didn't understand his mindset, and Lisa Jewell did not convince me that I should care. It ends with the kids cleaning out the house, getting it sold, and everything being hunky-dory. Of all the storylines, The one that I did enjoy the most was the hoarding, because it was almost like so revolting. It was awesome. I definitely sided with Meg a lot in the way that she could not understand why her mother just held on to things. For me, I would just taken it and thrown it all out. I'm like, I don't really care what you have to say. Although I know that you have to be more delicate in those situations. I don't really know the reality behind hoarding, but for me, Jewel convinced me enough that she knew what she was talking about, and this is what hoarding really looked like. And so you could see that even though old newspapers meant nothing to us, an old newspaper could mean a lot to a hoarder, because she was like an associative disorder in a sense, not dissociative, but associative. She needed to have a physical object in order to remind her of something. So if she has an old newspaper, it's the date on the newspaper that reminds her of something that had happened in the past. And sure, she could have a picture of it, but that picture doesn't mean much, or the memory, the idea, doesn't mean as much as having a physical reminder. Or a broken tea kettle. She could have the memory of the tea kettle and of the day, but if she actually had the tea kettle and she picked it up, she could remember not just a moment of that day, but the entire day. It was a fascinating look into the life of a hoarder. And also because Lorelai dies from pneumonia, but it was pneumonia brought on by malnutrition, because she couldn't afford to eat, because she'd spent all of her money on stuff. So it was really cool to see, obviously from that very first flashback to what ends up being the end, how she devolved. So as cool as all of that was, Lorelai was a disappointment for me, because I thought she was really wonderful in that very first flashback. Kind of Easter is the cement of time periods. So it starts out with Easter and then Easter egg hunting. Reese dies on Easter. Lots of things circle around Easter. So we open up with this really beautiful memory, this idyllic picture of the family Easter egg hunting. You're just falling in love with Lorelai, because even though she's a bit fairy, a bit like, woohoo, it's charming. But the charm lost its luster over the course of the book, because she couldn't base herself in reality. And maybe that's not a problem for everybody, but that was a problem for me. I wanted Lorelai, okay, so you're a hoarder, that's fine. But could you not act and speak like a rational person? And maybe that comes with the hoarding. Maybe hoarders have a problem basing themselves in the reality. So I wanted to like Lorelai, but I could not understand why she would do what she did. And that is a theme that I'm just gonna slap a big sticker on and say, I don't understand why anybody did what they did or thought what they thought, except for maybe Meg. And I do not understand anything about the plot, why it happened, where it was going, what Jewel was trying to achieve. The last two things I'm gonna talk about are that this book, more than any other, felt like there was an agenda, that Jewel wanted us to just accept everyone and everything. Where, in theory, that's not bad. But, like with the affair, to me it seemed that Meg was not allowed to have a problem with it. That this is what happened and this is what her husband and her sister wanted to do, ergo she should be fine with it because it's all her fault, because she is not thoughtful enough regarding her husband's needs or wants, or she's not thoughtful enough regarding her sister's needs or wants. Ergo, it's her fault that they found solace in each other. And to me, I don't accept that. No, like, you made a decision based off of your loins desires and not because it was what was the right thing to do. I really hate when a book has an agenda. Do not push your agenda onto me. Do not push your beliefs onto me. I do not want somebody to force what they think is right or wrong onto me by putting it in a book. That's where I'm gonna leave it, because you guys are probably gonna come after me pretty hardcore for being like, you need to be more open, you need to be more accepting, blah, 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 here's the way you're wrong. Okay, last thing is that I did feel like Jewell skipped characterizing moments or developmental moments. For instance, with Bill and Beth, or Bethan, we are kind of introduced to the possibility that something could happen when Bethan comes to stay with them during Meg's first pregnancy. Meg is about to have a baby, and so Bethan is there to help out for however long. And she's like, so I never even thought about Bill until this moment. I don't remember if it was a look or if it was something he said, but it was something that got her wheels turning, that maybe he saw her in a different kind of light. We see that she's sort of seen him in a different sort of light, and now there's this sexual tension, and we're wondering, is something gonna happen? He takes her to the airport when all is said and done, and that's that. And the next thing we know, they've been having an affair for like a year. I'm like, what? Jewell had introduced the idea of them possibly feeling more for each other. But then when Bethan leaves, when Bill drops her off, you really are given the impression that no, nothing is going to happen. There was a moment in time where Bethan was wondering, but in the end, no, like, it just stayed where it stayed. Yet it actually didn't stay there at all, because they've been sleeping with each other for who knows how long. And so Jewell did that quite a bit. And it's something that I have noticed in other books, where she'll introduce something, and for me at least, I'm left with the impression that that's it until, oh no, actually it wasn't it. And that bothers me, especially because the affair is a pretty important part of Meg's story, or even Beth's story. And as I hinted at before, we aren't even given reason as to why they're necessarily with each other. The relationship devolves to the point where you get the sense that Bill doesn't even respect Bethan as a partner, as someone to have an affair with. Like, the luster has gone out of it for him. So what was in it for him in the first place? Why is he still in it now if he can't even treat her right? I don't know. I don't know. That's where we're gonna leave it. House we grew up in. If you want to try it, if you like Lisa Jewell, go for it. See for yourself how you feel. But it was a departure for me from her other writings, because while it was still a mystery, while there were still events that needed to be solved, pieces that needed to be put together in order to understand the full picture, it was just a departure in many ways from her normal writing style. There we go. That's it. I'll see you later. Bye.